Instead of investigating, they chose to ridicule and call me crazy and tell me that I didn't do things the right way. There is no manual to tell a mother what to do when her child goes missing. I just did what God put on my heart to do.
What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, welcome to my channel. Today we have a True Crime Sunday which occurred in 2000, except it was sentenced just recently. Lily, do you mind? Anyway, True Crime Sunday, let's get to it. So in today's True Crime Sunday, we're going to be talking about Mike Williams. Mike Williams grew up with a brother called Nick and a mother and father. They grew up in a trailer. It was like one of those trailers that you couldn't actually move, as in drive around. It was one of those trailers that you just situate on a block of land, basically, and his mom's name was Cheryl. Both of the boys worked at a local supermarket. They tried to help out, you know, just with the family means by working night shift at the supermarket, and then they went to high school during the day. They went to North Florida Christian High School, and it was there that they met, or at least where Mike met his soon-to-be wife, Denise Merrill. In high school though, Mike was student council president. He played on the football team and he was also part of the Key Club. And basically, Key Club is where you learn leadership skills by like helping other people and being a decent bloke. And this is something that would be a part of his life for, well, his life. He was just a decent person. He liked to help people out. He would volunteer for things. So when Mike turned 15, he only had two loves. The first one was duck hunting and the second one was Denise Merrill. And when he graduated high school, he then went off to Florida State College, and that's where he went to study urban planning and political science. And I myself at university know, because I just continuously hear it from everybody at the university, that the best thing that you can possibly do while you're studying, or like while you're trying to get your undergraduate degree, is to get a job while you're studying a degree. And that is something that Mike actually did. So the owner of Ketchum Appraisal Group actually said that Mike was one of the most hardest working guys that he's ever seen. So Mike actually got a job as a property appraiser before he even graduated, and that's what he did basically until the day that he died. So it was actually in 1994 that he decided to tie the knot with Denise Merrill. She then became Denise Williams, and they bought their first home in a super upscale subdivision, which was just east of the city, which, I mean, his upbringing, growing up in a trailer to now owning your first home in a really nice part of town, living the dream. The downside to working so hard and, you know, reaching these goals was the fact that he would go to work really early in the morning, and oftentimes he wouldn't be back home until his daughter and Denise were actually already asleep. So there's a lot of missing family time, and obviously he was still making time for his duck hunting. So oftentimes he would go out duck hunting really early in the morning and then go to work afterwards. So there was not a lot of family time spent there. His daughter's name is actually Ainsley, and 1 year after Ainsley was born, Mike told his family that they were actually trying for another child, and after that he just disappeared, like without a trace. It was December 16th when Mike left his upscale community with his boat on the back of his car. Well, not on the back of his car, but trailing his car. It wasn't even light out at the time that he left. He left like really early in the morning. That day was actually their 6-year anniversary, and Denise was like, where's my husband? He hasn't come home. And so then she decided to call her dad and tell her dad that, hey, Mike hasn't come home yet, and it's our 6-year anniversary. Mike's best friend Brian and Brian's dad frequented all of the places that they thought he might be, that they thought that he, you know, because he frequented certain places when he went duck hunting, and they went to all of them, but he was not there. Brian's dad was especially close to Mike. They had a special bond, and Brian's wife Kathy, they would all do things together. So there was Brian and Kathy who were married, and then it was Denise and Mike Mike, who were married, and they did like couple things together. Like they were couple best friends. They would go to the movies together, they'd go on holidays together, they had their weddings really close together, they planned their babies close together. It was like a thing. Like they were a married couple best friend little thing. They found Mike's 1994 Ford Bronco on a boat launch on the Florida side of Jackson County. And that's when they decided to call search and rescue, and that's when a search party began searching for him. But the gods made it really difficult because a storm ensued, like a really, really bad storm. And so the search party actually had to stop. But before the storm rolled in, Brian and his dad actually found the boat. So they found Mike's boat in Lake Seminole, and they reported that to the authorities at the time. So after Mike went missing, you know how I said that there was the couples, you know what I'm saying? So you had Mike and Denise married. Mike is now missing. And then you've got Brian and Kathy. And after Mike went missing, they still started, they were still hanging out together, but it started getting to a point where Kathy was kind of dwindling out of the picture. And then you have Denise and Brian, who were spending a lot of time together. 11 days passed since Mike's disappearance, and Denise made claims for life insurance money. It was only a week later that both Brian and Denise made the final claims, like filed all the paperwork for Mike's life insurance money. Now remember, Brian is Mike's best friend, and Brian's married. So it's a bit strange. Like that would set off some red flags for me that these two are now doing things together. Like, and I'm like, oh, you know, okay, maybe he's just trying to be a good friend, you know, his best friend's gone missing. But then again, it's like, that's pretty final. He's only been missing for 19 days and you guys are making claims on his life insurance. The option on one of these forms was the, like, how they died, and they ticked the accidental drowning box. Even though Mike is still a missing person at this point, he hasn't been declared dead. So they're saying on this insurance form that he's dead and that he died from an accidental drowning. No body had been found, as in Mike's body had not been found. I know in my last video I got like a rude comment from someone saying like, how dare you refer to the victim's body as their body, because it, what did they say? Because it like takes away their identity. I disagree. I think if you're talking about someone's body and you're still saying their name in the video, then you're not disrespecting them whatsoever, like in my opinion. As long as I'm not saying the body in everything. Like if I'm just talking about like their physical body and I'm still identifying them like as their name and all that kind of stuff, I mean absolutely no disrespect, and I'm really sorry if you think that that's disrespectful. But yeah, in the last case that I did, I actually worked with her mother. I worked with the victim's mother. So I think if there was anything, any issue, then her mother would have said that to me before uploading or in the way that I was talking or anything like that. So, you know, if you're just like a random viewer out there who's taking issue with, you know, me saying the body, then I'm really sorry. And there are lots and lots of other true crime people, and definitely call me out if I am doing anything like actually disrespectful, but I disagree on this fact. So anyway, there was no body found, but at this point it had been a little bit of time and they had chalked it down to a drowning, even though they hadn't found a body. And they had said at the end of their investigation that it was most likely an alligator in Lake Seminole which had eaten him. So it was at this point that they were no longer looking for Mike alive. They were looking for a body at the bottom of the lake. So searchers got together and they got in their boats and they got these PVC pipes. And what they do is they literally poke every inch of the bottom of the lake, hoping that they would find something squishy that would give way and then lift up to the top. And also, by some point after a body dies and it's in the water, gases will release and it will usually float to the top. But it never did. And they literally poked every single inch of Lake Seminole and did not find anything. They said that there has not been one case ever in the history of them searching for a drowned person in this lake that they haven't been able to find a body. Yet no body was found in this lake. Because Mike's body could not be found, this meant that Denise wouldn't get her payout because they could not declare that he was dead. So it was only 6 months after his disappearance that Denise had applied for a death certificate. Now, I've watched the entire trial for this. For all of my cases, I watched the entire trial if there's one available. That's why it's taken me like 2 weeks to get through this. So I watched the whole entire trial. Every single witness that came up to talk about this particular fact that she had applied for a death certificate only 6 months after the disappearance with no body found, they said that was unheard of. They never heard of that before she did it, and they've never seen it after she did it either. No one has ever applied for a death certificate for a missing person that close to when they went missing. They said usually the time frame is 5 to 10 years after a person goes missing before they declare them dead. But in Denise's situation, the judge actually granted her a death certificate. So she got a death certificate for a missing person only 6 months after the person went missing. And that is when she actually got the payout for his life insurance, and she got a couple of them. So with the first company, which is actually one that Brian sold her, because Brian's day job is an insurance broker man. So he actually sold them this policy before the murder. So he sold them this policy for $1.7 million. Yes, $1.7 million. The first payout was for $260,000, just over that number. And then the second payout was for $1.6 million. But that wasn't the only insurance policy that she had out on her husband's life. She actually had another insurance policy which paid her $250,000. Because she didn't disclose that she got another policy for $1.7 million, the person who was representing the second insurance company said that if she had have disclosed that she got that amount before, that's when they would have, there would have been red flags and there would have been an investigation much earlier on. But because she didn't disclose it, there weren't any red flags and she got all the payouts. So my spidey senses by this point would have been tingling. No, they would have been off chops by this point. I'd be like, they're dodgy. There's something going on there. Like over $1.7 million in life insurance. As soon as somebody says that someone died and their partner has life insurance and it's like a dodgy death, I'm like, the person you married did it. Like that person did it. Whoever's going to benefit from that life insurance policy, they did it. But I don't know, apparently investigations just were like, yeah, it's fine. And even after Brian divorced his wife Kathy and then married Denise, there was still no investigation. But again, there was still no body found, so there was no technical murder. Even just the police and everybody just continued to chalk it down to an alligator eating Mike after he had drowned. And Mike's family were just like, no, especially his mum Cheryl. And this is, if there's anything that's gonna make me cry in this case, is Cheryl. She went beyond the ends of the earth to be like, this is not right. This is not right. There is something wrong here. She bought billboards. She hassled investigators. She did a lot. We'll get into that later. But she was like, no, and no one would listen to her. But keep in mind that Denise still had her granddaughter Ainsley, and she still wanted to be able to see Ainsley. So she was getting weekly visits with her granddaughter. And even though she didn't outright say, I think Denise did it, because she still wanted that relationship with Ainsley, she was saying to the police, this isn't, like, this is not, it doesn't, no, she just no, it just wasn't a thing. And it got to the point where she alienated herself from police because she wouldn't back down, and the police were getting very, I guess, annoyed with her continuously asking them to reopen the case. And I literally could not think of that word for so long. I went on my live and I was like, guys, what is this word? And I was literally on there for 10 minutes until someone told me that the word was alienated. It was like on the tip of my head. So thank you to whoever did that. Shout out to you. You really saved me on this one because I have been stuck on this word for so long. But yes, she was very persistent with the police. She kept saying, reopen my son's case right now. And they just wouldn't. And so she was alienated, and they actually stopped returning her calls in 2006. Cheryl was standing on street corners, she was handing out flyers, she even paid for a billboard, and she wrote 2,600 unanswered letters to the governor. Now, something really heartbreaking here is that those 2,600 letters, because she wrote one every single day, so those 2,600 letters that she sent to the governor, they didn't even open them. None of the letters are open. They actually forwarded them to police headquarters, and they now sit in a box. And she is quoted as saying that, I'll find it in here somewhere, but she is quoted as saying they might as well have punched me in the face, that it hurt that bad. And this woman is a frail, elderly woman who is so sweet, and she runs like this little daycare with all the neighborhood children, and all she wanted was to know what happened to her son. I want a mother like Cheryl. If I had a mother, I would want a mother like Cheryl. She's beautiful. But because nobody would listen to her, they stopped returning her phone calls. She decided to hire her own expert. And her expert actually said, the alligator theory makes absolutely zero sense. So the expert said that it was way too cold on, like at the time that Mike disappeared, for the alligators to even be interested in food. At that point, alligators, like as in at that temperature, alligators are basically just trying to maintain their body temperature. They don't do a lot. They don't eat. They're not in, like, it's too cold for them to be interested in food. It was that cold that the searchers that night, and around the time when they were searching for Mike's body, had to actually set 55-gallon like drums, 55-gallon drums on fire so they could keep warm. The lake itself frosted over. The expert also said that if there was any slight possibility that an alligator would defy all known alligator behavior by eating a body, that there is no way that alligator would be able to eat 77 kilos worth of Mike's body. And so the expert straight up said, like, it's really easy to debunk this theory just by using logic. So after the 6 months, they actually found Mike's waders. And if you don't know what waders are, they are basically rubber, like, shoes. No, they're not shoes. They start from the bottom. So they're basically shoes that go all the way up to here, so that you can stand in a lake without getting, like, wet and hunt for ducks. So you can stand in there, and it's like a little, I'll put a picture of it here. This is what waders are. I didn't know what they were until this case, but just what they are. So anyway, the waders were found in the lake near some alligator excrement, and also his hunting license was found. So remember, this is 6 months after he went missing, and if this stuff was meant to be in the water for 6 months, you would expect there to be some sort of water damage, but they were pristine. And so people thought that someone must have placed these here, because I'm not even kidding you, the license, like, there was not even anything wrong with the printing on there. It literally looked like someone had just put it there. So the idea of the waders being how he drowned was that if you do fall in the water, that goes past the section where the waders stop. So usually it comes up here like overalls, and if the water gets in past there, it will fill up with water and you'll sink because you can't get it off. So that's how they thought that he had drowned. But they actually did not know that when he started duck hunting, his mother got really worried about him and organized for him to have lessons on how to escape from waders had he fallen in the water. And then in the testimony, or at least in the trial, Howard Drew actually taught him how to get out of his waders. So he had actual lessons, and Howard said that Mike was actually that good at escaping from waders that he jumped from the jumping board of his pool with waders on and successfully got out of his waders. Like, there's no way that he didn't know how to get out of his waders. There was no way that he could have drowned by sinking with his waders on because he knew how to get out of them. It was in 2007, so that's 7 years after his disappearance, that his brother Nick saw a photograph which sparked his memory. And the photograph was of this gun, this 22 caliber gun that their father had had gifted Mike prior to his father's death. So he realized that this was the only gun that Denise actually never returned to them. That she returned all the other guns apart from this gun. And so that's when the Bureau of Tobacco, Alcohol and Firearms started their own investigation. They were basically looking for this gun. And so they went to Denise's house, which used to be Mike's house, but she's now living in Mike's house with Mike's best friend Brian, who she now is married to. So they went to their house. They went to Mike's old house and they retrieved the gun, and the gun was sent off for testing. And this is when Denise and Brian then decided they would make a trip to Cheryl's house. They were sick of Cheryl constantly trying to reopen this case, and so they went over to her house. They shouted at this elderly woman and they said, if you don't stop trying to reopen this investigation, you will never see Ainsley again. And Cheryl was like, I love Ainsley, but Mike is my son. But Denise was not having it. Denise basically said, you need to move on. Stop trying to cause problems for us. We're moving on. She was like, I've moved on, you need to move on. And here we have a third investigation from a different bureau. So basically now we've got an investigation which has started up for insurance fraud. So we've had a missing persons inquiry, we've had the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms inquiry, and now we've got an insurance fraud inquiry. And every single one of these bureaus are like, there's something suspicious happening here. But just like with the other investigations, they could not come to any conclusion and they had to close the case because there was no body, there was no evidence. But each and every one of them said, something suspicious is happening here. We need the evidence. We need some form of evidence. And they couldn't find any. At this point, Denise and Brian basically seemed impenetrable. You know what I'm trying to say? They basically seemed like nothing could get them to open their mouths. But just like they had decided to get together after this, I don't know, they seem like they're love freaks. Like they need some sort of cheating to live with their life, because both of them ended up cheating on each other after this. So I'm like, keep it in your pants, sister. And by sister, I mean both of them. I'm not being like sexist. I'm just saying, you did the thing, you got away with it, and now you're gonna test fate by cheating on each other and making each other mad. So Brian ended up cheating on Denise first. He cheated on her with this lady called Angela, and then Denise decided that, you know, I'm angry at that and I'm gonna cheat on you with a guy named Chuck. And so she cheated on him with a guy named Chuck, but she decided to stay with Chuck, and this angered Brian. So they actually got a separation, and she decided she wanted to be with Chuck. We now have Brian and Denise cheating on each other. And now we have Brian and Denise getting a separation. So they're separated now. And interestingly, on their separation filing, it said that it was because Brian is a sex addict. He refutes this. We don't know, but both of them seem to be addicted to cheating on people. So for the separation, Brian was meant to do this appraisal for their house. He was meant to file this on August 5th. And on the day that it was due, Denise was going from home to work when she looked in her rearview mirror, and Brian is in the back seat with a gun, yelling at her, giving her directions on where to go, and basically saying, I have nothing left to live for. Yeah, he was frantic. So Brian had with him his gun, a tarp, and bleach. Now, you think of that what you will, but Denise is a very charming lady. She was able to calm him down and get him to release her. She was like, I'm not gonna go to the police. She promised him she wouldn't go to the police, but as we would all do, after you're let go, you'd go to the police, and that's what she did. So she went to the police and told them exactly what had happened, and the police at that point in time told the investigator in charge, do not question her about the Mike Williams case. Don't ask her any questions about that. So Brian got arrested for kidnapping, domestic assault, and armed burglary, and Denise then got a protection order against him. Brian asked for the 10-year minimum and the prosecution asked for the 45-year maximum, but he actually ended up getting 20 years in prison and a 15-year probation. Cheryl at the time commented and said that she hoped that Brian wouldn't he wouldn't commit suicide because she still believed that Mike was alive. She still held out hope, and it's, yeah, I see. She's his mum, but this is quite some time later. So she still believed that Mike was alive, and she wanted Brian to tell her what he knew because she believed that Brian was the key to reuniting her with her son. So in Denise's investigation in the kidnapping, remember how I said that they were like, don't investigate her, don't ask her any questions about the Mike Williams case. Well, this is why. So after Brian was sentenced, Special Agent Mark Perez then held a press conference saying that they had found Mike Williams's body and he was buried. Perez said that it was due to homicide, and then he got an indictment for the arrest of Denise Williams. It was literally minutes after the grand jury had approved the indictment that authorities arrested Denise, and it was also Ainsley's 19th birthday. So they arrested her on Ainsley's 19th birthday, minutes after the grand jury approved her indictment. They were waiting for this. Like, they planned this, and good, because that's really smart what they had done. The indictment was for first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and accessory after the fact. The media then swarmed to Cheryl's house and asked for a comment, but she withheld her comment and she stayed within her dwelling. It was 2 days later that they released the 3-page indictment for Denise, which said that they believe she had planned this 9 months previous to his actual murder. So they had planned this for 9 months. Denise then entered a plea of not guilty. So what happened on that morning in 2000? We're in 2019 right now. So what happened 19 years ago? It was on that morning when Mike left and he was actually going to meet Brian. Brian had convinced him to take his own car, so he had convinced them to take separate cars, and Brian said that he was really paranoid about like cell phone tower pinging, even though this was like ages ago when their cell phones were where you had to click the button like 3 times. I remember that. We had to click A 3 times to get C. No, you had to click, whatever number it was. You had to click 3 times to get 1 letter. So I don't know what their technology was like back then, but apparently he knew that there was ping on towers. But the point is, technology back then was not as good as what it is now. They already tried to get phone records, but if it's a local call, it actually doesn't tell you like where it was. And by this point, all the records are purged anyway. He told Mike, hey, don't call me. My battery's dead. You've got absolutely no reason to call me. And by the way, can you wear your waders because we're running out of time. It was meant to be like this special spot. And so Mike was like, yeah, man, I'll wear my waders. They took separate cars. And so he was wearing his waders. They were in the boat. They were on this special spot. Brian convinced Mike to stand up in the boat. And when Mike did stand up, Brian pushed him off. Brian's idea of what would happen, because this is kind of a myth, really. I mean, there is some truth to it, but it's basically a myth. When you fall into the water and you've got your waders on and it is a part of the lake where you are filling up with water, as in you can't stand, you'll drown. I guess that Brian didn't know that Mike had this training. I figure because they're best friends that he would have known, but maybe it's just not something that they ever spoke about. So Brian had thought that Mike didn't know how to get out of the water, so he just thought he was just gonna drown. And at some point Mike did sink into the water, but because he had that training, he could actually get out of the waders, and so he did. He swam over to a stump that was out of the water, because in this lake there's like stumps that are like poking out of the water a bit of a distance away. I saw a picture, and if I can find it, I'll put it here. So he was literally clinging on for dear life on this stump. And Brian was pretty much shook, and he was like, what? I didn't plan for this. I didn't know what to do. I just needed to get out of this situation. And so he circled around his best friend, who was probably confused, probably had no idea what was going on. And if I were thinking with my logical mind, which I'm sure that Brian wasn't doing at this time, he probably could have gotten out of the situation by being like, I'm so sorry, that was meant to be like a practical joke, and he could have gotten himself out of the situation and chosen not to murder his best friend, because his best friend is safe by this point, hanging onto a stump. All he had to do was reach out and pull him back onto the boat and dealt with an angry best friend later. You know what I'm saying? But he decided not to. He decided to circle around the stump twice, pick up his shotgun, and shoot his best friend in the face. His best friend is now faceless. The body is sinking down into the lake. He reaches in and then grabs his friend, pulls him back onto the boat, and then he takes his friend and puts him in the boot of his car, and he takes his head and puts it in a dog crate. Where does Denise fall into this plan? So Denise was the person who was supposed to give Mike permission to go. The murder was planned for the week before he actually got murdered, but she got cold feet. As soon as it came up closer and closer to their anniversary, she realized that no, she actually does want to do this. Denise and Mike were having marital problems. Obviously, she wasn't that into him, and he had just told his family that, hey, we're planning on having more children. We've just had Ainsley a year ago, and I want to have more children. And obviously, Denise is freaking out internally. She doesn't want to get intimate with him. She hasn't been intimate with him since Ainsley was born. And Mike was like, I have planned this getaway for our anniversary. And their anniversary was the day they murdered him, because she was scared of getting intimate with him. And also, one of their life insurance policies on his life was about to lapse because he didn't want to pay the premium on it anymore, because they had taken out so many life insurance policies on his life. And he was like, we don't need this many. And so she was like, before he cancels this insurance policy, before the weekend of our anniversary, or at least on the weekend of our anniversary, before I have to get intimate with my husband again, we have to kill him. And so they did. So her only job was to give him permission and have her own alibi, being like calling people at home, having that phone record there, being like, I was at home calling people worried about my husband with Ainsley. So that was her only job. Obviously, you've got freaking old mate over here who's doing the murder, who's been a sucker for Denise. You know, both of them are in the wrong. He's definitely done a lot more than what she has. Both of them are still culpable though. Brian then realized that, whoa, this has taken a lot longer, you know, murdering my best friend has taken a lot longer than what I had thought it would. His alibi was supposed to be his father-in-law. They were actually meant to go hunting. And so he had planned to murder Mike, then quickly go home and go on this hunting trip with his father-in-law. So that would be his alibi. So he'd actually drugged his wife the night before. He went to he got her drunk, and that's where he was like, cool, put some medication in her drink, and she was meant to have slept through the whole thing, not realizing how early he went out that morning. But because he had taken so long, the medication likely would have worn off by now. He went home anyway. He still climbed into bed and pretended that he'd been there the whole time. He made enough of a fuss to be like, oh my God, I overslept. We shouldn't have drank last night. I need to call your dad and be like, I'm so sorry. I overslept. I was in bed this whole time. His alibi is still kind of working because she wouldn't have known that he had left the house, that he was only just getting home. So he did that. And when he went out to his car, he realized that he had parked on a slope. And he realized that when you have a dead body in your car, blood will drip out of it. And so blood was dripping out onto the driveway. And he was like, I need to fix this. And so he left. He went to Walmart, and the karma of murdering someone could not have been so heavy on this situation, because karma was like, I'm gonna give you every single obstacle. But somehow these two got through every single obstacle. When he went to Walmart, he ran into his friend. His friend would later say, yeah, he seemed really like frantic, but I thought that he was just frantic because like his best friend was missing, and you know, I didn't realize that his best friend was actually in the boot of his car, and he was actually at Walmart to get a shovel. So when he had finished burying his best friend, he actually also ran into an officer. His best friend's in the ground, an officer is walking by, and he has to make small talk with this officer. Again, karma putting all these obstacles in his way. He manages to escape this conversation with the officer. He's covered in ants, literally covered in ant bites. He said he was shocked that he actually got out of that conversation. He said he was shocked that no one questioned him on all the ant bites all over him. He, again, karma putting obstacles in their way. He looked for a pressure washer for his car. There was none in his town. He actually had to leave town to find somewhere where he could clean his car. So he took a little bit longer than expected because he had plans with Kathy's family, like wrapping presents or something like that. And he was late to them, but he still made them. So after all of these obstacles, he managed to get through them, and no one was any the wiser. So why would Brian murder his best friend? Why would he do all of this? Well, it turns out that he's been dating Denise for 3 whole years prior to them murdering Mike. So he said that it started out just by having like an inappropriate conversation with her where they were talking about things they shouldn't have really be talking about with married people, like what they liked in sex and things like that. And then that slowly eventuated to they kissed one time. And then it eventuated to them meeting each other on their coffee breaks, on their lunch breaks, and having sex in the parking lot. And it turned into this fully fledged love affair that they just could not get away from. And this is my question. Do you have to murder? Could you not just get a divorce? Apparently not. Apparently Denise was like, you know what, I don't really want to be a divorcee. It doesn't seem as great as being a widower where people give me like, I don't know, sympathy and stuff and possibly some free food because my husband is missing. So she was like, look, I'm not going to be a divorcee. There's no way I'm divorcing my husband. I'm not going to be that person. But you know what I will be? I'm going to be a widower, or I'm going to be the wife where her husband is missing. I'm going to get that sympathy. So she was happy to be a widower, not too keen on being a divorcee. And so that's why they had to murder him. Kathy would later testify in the trial and say, look, I wasn't stupid. I did have my suspicions that my husband was, you know, that he really liked Denise. I did feel like I was the third wheel. When I would go out with my husband and Denise, it felt like I was the third wheel, that I was on this date where they were on a date. You know what I'm saying? Like where I was butting in on their date. And she was like, it got to a point where I didn't even want to hang out with them anymore. She said there was an occasion where he wanted to go on this trip with Denise and Mike said he wasn't going. And she was like, well, if Mike's not going, then I'm not going. And she refused to go because she felt like he just wanted to spend time with Denise. He didn't want to be with her. And she felt like she was the third wheel. She said in one occasion she found some like stubs to movie tickets to a movie that she never went to. And when she questioned him about it, he told her that he actually took Denise. And so she wasn't this stupid person that had no idea, you know what I'm saying? And people really underestimate Kathy, but in every single, well, I mean, I've only seen one other true crime show do a thing on this particular case, but they actually never mentioned this part about Kathy, which I think this is like really badass on her part. In the investigation to Denise in trying to get evidence against her, Kathy became a confidential informant where she went undercover. She pretended to be Denise's friend still. If I knew that this woman had murdered her husband so that she could have an affair with my husband, I don't think that I would be able to successfully pull off being her friend. But I guess maybe Kathy's anger in the situation and her want for justice might have been able to get her through that. But she did. Badass Kathy People underestimate her here. Badass Kathy was a confidential informant. She went undercover and recorded all of their conversations. So Kathy actually said in her calls, hey, Brian, when he was really upset with you, when you cheated on him, he actually told me that you guys had planned it. And now I'm really worried because I've got a subpoena and I'm gonna have to testify. And Denise is freaking out, she's freaking out. Obviously there was no subpoena because she's a confidential informant and she's just made it up to like record the conversation just to see what she would say. But still, Kathy was badass here and I wanna give her her props, give her her dues where dues are due. Is that a thing? I don't know if that's a thing. But you're badass, Kathy, if you're watching this. Which I'm sure you're not watching this, but still. I know that Kathy got duped here, but I just want to say, if anyone's feeling sorry for Kathy, just know that she's got a new husband now, and I hope that she lives the life that she deserves, because she got a trash bag husband, and I hope she lives a better life than with this stupid, dumbass, poo head, trash bag husband. Denise decided that she wasn't going to testify. Obviously, that was on the advice of her attorneys. She had a really shitty attorney, in my opinion, because he just kept stumbling over his words. It frustrated me to listen to his questions of every single witness and just like shitting over his words. I'm like, come on, you're an attorney. I'm sure you're getting paid really good money. Can you talk better? Her defense basically in their closing arguments blamed everything on Brian and just said, no, Brian's just a scorned lover. He's the one who murdered Mike. It's all on him. They also denied that Denise ever had any kind of relationship with Brian prior to the murder. They were like, no, she didn't even know that Brian was this crazy person. And so they're claiming that it was only after the murder that she fell in love with Brian, which I do not believe, because they wrote love letters. They showed the love letters in trial. I don't know how you can have closing statements saying that she never knew and that it was all Brian. He's just a scorned lover, blaming him murdering someone on her. But apparently they're sticking to their story regardless of the evidence. So the jury came back and found Denise guilty on all counts, and at sentencing it was actually Cheryl who came in and said her piece. And I promised that I wouldn't cry in this video because I got so emotional in my last case, not my last case, the case before that, where I just like sobbed and cried. But I did have a little tearful moment when I watched this video of the sentencing.
I made telephone calls, put up missing person signs, compiled my notes into a book, and had people post on social media for me. With the help of friends, we raised money and put up billboards. I bought ads in the Tallahassee Democrat and worked with the Twin City News, asking everyone to help me find Mike. I stood on street corners waving my picket signs with pictures of Mike on them. I was cussed out by ministers for being too close to their church. I wrote 2,600 letters to the governor of Florida asking for help in finding my son. I begged Fish and Game to do a criminal investigation. They told me Mike drowned and got eaten by alligators, and there was no need for an investigation. They laughed at me and called me crazy. 9 months after Mike disappeared, his wife Denise told me if I continued to seek a criminal investigation, I would lose Ansley, my granddaughter, Mike's only child. Denise might as well have waved a red flag in front of a bull. I knew that she knew where Mike was or what happened to him. Judge Hankinson, I am a fighter, not a victim. I love Ansley, but Mike was my son. I became even more determined to find the truth. If I had not done what I did for 17 years, Mike's disappearance would have never been solved. It took me 3.5 years to get FDLE to open an investigation into Mike's disappearance because the Winchester and Merrill families pushed the theory that alligators had eaten Mike. Fish and Game and FDLE should have known that alligators are ectothermic. They don't eat in cold water. Instead of investigating, they chose to ridicule and call me crazy and tell me that I didn't do things the right way. There is no manual to tell a mother what to do when her child goes missing. I just did what God put on my heart to do. Judge Hankinson, not only did Denise kill my son, she stole my granddaughter Ansley, Mike's only child. For her entire life, Ansley was raised in a house with the murderers of her father, while being denied the love of her father's family. She was told that Grandmama Cheryl was crazy and would hurt her. I have had no relationship with her since she was 5.5 years old. Judge Hankinson, there is no amount of prison time that will bring Mike back to me. I don't know if I will ever have Ansley in my life again because of the damage her mother has done. I am asking you to lock Denise Merrill Williams Winchester up for the rest of her life with no chance of parole. She has already lived 18 years longer than my son. She got to watch Mike's daughter grow up. Nick, Mike, and I didn't. Please don't allow Denise to ever be around any of her future grandchildren, because one generation of Williams children growing up around murderers is enough. Judge Hankinson, for the rest of my life, when I try to sleep at night, I will see my son clinging to a tree stump in Lake Seminole in the dark, knowing that his best friend is trying to kill him. I hear his voice screaming for help. I wasn't there to help him. It will haunt me forever. In conclusion, Judge Hankinson, we are in this courtroom today because of God, not Cheryl Williams. I am Mike's mother, and I did what God told me to do. My son's horrific death demands justice. With today's sentencing of Denise Merrill Williams Winchester, I believe justice will have been served. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
This was the saddest part because during the whole trial, all of the investigators who were questioned in the trial were all like, we did this to do, you know, to come to this conclusion, and we're so smart and all this kind of stuff. But something that actually made me cry, the thing that genuinely made me cry, was when Cheryl said, well, she started to cry, and that made me want to cry. And so I'm not going to cry so y'all don't cry, because I got snaps last time where you guys were like, I'm crying because you're crying. So I'm not going to cry. Stop crying. Are you crying? I'm crying. No, okay. Anyway, normal. So Cheryl started to cry, and she told the court and the judge how the police constantly ridiculed her and called her crazy. She was literally crying. She was like, the police called me crazy. They ridiculed me. And she said the whole time her granddaughter grew up in a house with a murderer, and that she grew up thinking that her grandmother was crazy. I saw Denise, and she didn't seem to be affected by it at all, which was a weird contrast, because me, being someone who has never met this lady in my life, I have no close ties to her, I was bawling my eyes out. And then I looked at Denise, and she knows this lady. She is this lady's daughter-in-law, but she is not crying, and she's not reacting to it. She's just like unbothered, and I'm just confused by that. It's just a very strange contrast to me, especially because I don't know her. So she obviously has no empathy, or maybe I've just got too much, I don't even know. So Denise was sentenced to 30 years in jail, and then another sentence it was a life sentence. So she's meant to serve that concurrently, and she also got a lot of fines. How are you supposed to pay fines in prison? I don't know, maybe like from her savings, but she had to pay a lot of legal fees as well, and they read out all of those fines. So usually when I do a mystery video, I say what they knew to have happened, and then at the end I say all my different theories on what happened. My videos are always going to be long because I do a lot of research for them. I don't just read Wikipedia and tell you what the internet says. I do my research. I even speak to the victims' families. They're always going to be in-depth cases. So if you're wanting just a Wikipedia read, you can go to any other YouTuber who does true crime. My videos are always going to be in-depth. So if you don't want a long video, don't tune into my True Crime Sundays. This is the only part of social media that I don't get paid for. This is the only part of social media that I genuinely enjoy. And so I'm gonna do it however the heck I wanna do it. So I'm sorry about it, hun. But to all the people who have left me lovely messages on my last one, who really do connect with these cases and do connect with the victims and do genuinely hope that the mystery cases get solved, thank you so much for watching my videos, for sharing my videos on Instagram. I love that. I will always repost your reposting, so thank you. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. It really does help. Leave a comment down below if there's a mystery case, a missing persons case, or a murder that you want me to cover. Again, I don't tend to cover the already well-known cases that a lot of other YouTubers do. I do like doing my own research and covering the smaller cases that don't get a lot of airtime. So please let me know in the comments down below if there's anything that you want me to cover. And thank you so much for watching. I'll leave my head here if you want to subscribe. I'll see you next Sunday.